Neil, Barnett, how are you today? Rocky Ray Hudson, how are you today?
Magic, magic, magic.
I'm looking forward. I'm really looking forward to interrogating Rocky.
Yeah, I know.
On Pep, and I mean, I think probably everyone listening will know that Rocky is possibly the world's biggest Barcelona fan. Certainly, the biggest Barcelona fan to come out of Newcastle, and
that's without question.
Yeah,
without question.
And I think I think he's one of the most intriguing personalities in the game.
Rocky is. I know that. I'm not sure that. I'm not sure Pep is, but Rocky is for sure. Look, I want to start out just by talking to both of you about something that Fabio Capello said to me. We were having coffee. No, we were eating lunch actually at the Dorchester in London, where I've got in trouble there before.
Pasta.
We were eating at the. There's a French restaurant there. A Chinese restaurant. It's excellent. I can't think of the French restaurant's name. Anyway, we were eating at the French restaurant, and he said to me, I was just talking to him about football, and I told him that, he knows I'm a Milan fan and the great Milan teams that he had one of the great ones, but he didn't take credit for it. He said, three modern managers have changed the way football is played. He said, and what he meant by that was everyone tried to either emulate them or to figure out how they could beat them. And he said it was Johan Cruyff's, really Rinus Michels' Ajax team of the 70s. That was a team that changed football forever. He said Arrigo Sacchi's teams of the late 80s, early 90s, the ones that he inherited. He gives full credit to Arrigo Sacchi for creating a system that, again, changed the game. They used to call it champagne football. Ray, how's that? Yeah, the AC Milan team, excuse me. And he said Pep Guardiola's Barcelona team. In each case, he said it wasn't so much that they were the best team, although they were, but it's just the way they played, the style they played changed the game forever. And I wanted, I've asked that question to great managers, including the great Sir Alex Ferguson, maybe the greatest manager in my mind that ever lived. And he said, yeah, I would agree with that. And it wasn't a knock against Capello or Sir Alex Ferguson or any of these other managers. It was just saying that they changed the way the game was played.
Well, Rocky, what made you love Pep's Barcelona so much? And did you love Barcelona before Pep?
I loved Barcelona's dream team, Neil. That was my indoctrination to a type of football that was just in back in them days. You didn't see it too frequently, but whenever it was on TV, Barcelona's I'll never forget the cameras at Camp Nou made that field look like two fields. It was so expansive, but the manner in which they played with Stoichkov and Romario and Guardiola, there was something about them that was just compelling to me. And I'd loved different varieties of beautiful football, but and there were other teams that were playing as entertaining and as intriguing and compelling as what Barcelona did, but there was something about the manner in it. And then when I started to read into more about the club itself and what it represented, it became even more magnetic to me. But when Guardiola first took over, Neil, I knew him as an important player, a big player in past editions, but it didn't start well for Guardiola. If in those days are easily forgotten, when he took over after the president Gaspar had some bad days at Barcelona, and the mood was not good. The pre-season, I remember, at Scotland, where I think it was Hibs or Aberdeen or some teams that were applauding them off the field. I was in England at the time, and it was amazing. But when the season started, they lost their game against the newly promoted team, Numancia. And this was a man who came out with all of the right things that the Barcelona fans wanted to say, wanted to hear, and we'll get into that more intrinsically. But his message it wasn't a cataclysmic explosion of Barcelona. Then after the Numancia game, they drew against Racing Santander. Now, the handkerchiefs were basically ready to be brought out. This was not the right coach. And of course, he became the greatest coach in Barcelona's history, in my opinion. And I've been asked if I wanted to interview him several times. And I've said this to Charlie. I would always deny it. I couldn't, because I'd tell him I hate him. I hate him for what he did to my life in the flipping game, in the enjoyable nature of watching regular football. Then his team comes along and spoils me for the rest of my life. Even to this day, I watch games, I watch wonderful games, I watch fantastic games with clubs from Italy and Spain and England and France, and nothing compares, in my eyes, to that team. And he destroyed the game for me, Neil. He spoiled me forever with what he did with that magical side. Not just the players, but what he infused in them. This was a hard-working team where the forwards ran to get the ball back. Run, you bastards, run! That was the mantra from him. And the magic that came through, because the players knew that he was Barcelona's DNA. And he said, we're a team. This was the big message he gets across. And it wasn't the individuals. He said, I can forgive you for everything. If you make a bad pass, if you miss an open header, if you miss an open goal, I can forgive you. We all will forgive you. But if you don't give 100%, that's where the line's dropped. And that's such a simple thing. But they all bought into it, and it's become inherent in Barcelona's football, even to this day, when they're trying to recapture those halcyon days of Guardiola. The detail that he went into it was amazing. The vibe that just emanated through his team and teams, by the way, which we'll get into. But for me, this was a man who truly, it was not just a tactical genius, but the attacking football that he played, suicidally high back lines, majestic players, magical footballers, but they all bought into the team ethic, team first.
When you talk about
wait a minute, let me ask Rocky if he liked that team or not.
When you talk about him, you are so passionate, so intense. And when I see him, he is so passionate and so intense. And what he has done with his ridiculous achievement in the way his teams have possession. Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Manchester City, all average around 70% possession per game. I mean, it's nothing we've ever seen before. They make the pitch big, but yet they keep the areas in which they have possession small and just switch it to the other side when they need to break away from the opposition. What he does is win by a distance. And when he's not winning by a distance, I just get the feeling that that intensity turns inwards on him and on his team. And I think that's where the flaws are. I just want to give you this. He took over in 2008 at Barcelona when he'd been in charge of the second team. They come third that season and lost in the Champions League semi-final to Manchester United. So however poor his start was in that first season, they won the league by 11 points. They won the Champions League by 2 goals, 2-0 against Manchester United. They won the Copa del Rey final, smashing Athletic Bilbao 4-1. He was 37 years old and he won the treble. Youngest manager to win the Champions League. The following season, Barcelona broke the record for the most number of points in La Liga, 99 points. Real Madrid only 3 behind. in 2010-11, they won the league with 96 points, 4 ahead of Real Madrid. They won the Champions League final by 2 goals. But when it was tight in the Copa del Rey final, they lost that to Real Madrid 1-0. And then the following season, 11-12, it all kind of caved in. And I've got to tell you this story. I was in Barcelona in 2012 with Chelsea for the semi-final. And it had all been going wrong. And Pep had fallen out with Gerard Piqué. And he hadn't been playing him, and he hadn't felt that his performances were good enough. And he was clearly annoyed that Piqué was more obsessed with Shakira, his new wife or girlfriend, as she was at the time, whatever, than he was with the team, which I think some of us can understand. And he dropped him. And Chelsea won the first leg 1-0. And in between the 2 games, Barcelona had lost at home to Real Madrid, who were top of the league, Mourinho's Real Madrid, and were going to win the league. So Barcelona were losing the league. And at the press conference the day before the second leg, he put Piqué up to talk, which just seemed so strange. They'd fallen out so publicly. And then when he himself gave his press conference, he fell out with the Spanish media and swore at them. And it was just something we hadn't seen before. And then when the game started, he had a new shape. He threw everything out the window he'd been doing. He had 3 at the back. And his 3 at the back were Piqué, Mascherano in the middle, and Puyol on the left. And after 15 minutes, Piqué got knocked out by bad goalkeeping by Valdez, who punched him when he was trying to punch the ball, and went off. And Dani Alves hadn't started. He brought Dani Alves on, who is a great footballer, but not a great defender, and put him at the back. So he had a back 3 of Alves, Mascherano, and Puyol. And people wonder why Barcelona let them 2 goals that game and went out that night of the Champions League.
I was at that game.
Yeah, and it just
needed
seemed
to say it.
It just seemed as though he'd lost his focus in his intensity, and this is something that I think has followed him from club to club. Is that fair?
Let me jump in here, because I don't want to beat up Ray, but I do want to bring another example. Is it these managers that are cutting edge, who have perfection as their goal? And I can't pretend, because I wasn't old enough to really understand what Rinus Michels was doing. I only knew from, being a kid and saying, wow, that's pretty amazing stuff. But so I didn't know him personally. I knew the style of play, but you know guys like Pep Guardiola with modern, with the internet and everything else. Guys like Saki. And Saki left the game because he said there was too much pressure.
Right.
And Pep left the game, or leaves the game frequently. Right, exactly. Too much, citing too much pressure. And it's a funny thing, and I'm very friendly with Arrigo Sacchi. I don't know Pep Guardiola. I met him a couple of times. I don't want to pretend for a second I know him personally. And it's a question I'm going to ask Sacchi next time I see him. Why do you take this pressure, as you said, Neil, and internalize it? It seems like that's what they do when things aren't going exactly the way they want them to go.
It's wonderful, isn't it? That's, it's wonderful for me, listening to that, Charlie, because it's human. That's the human. We think of these people as just, putting the pieces on the blackboard and giving the instructions to these magical players and to go out. But what it is that emotional cost that it takes on you. It milks you, because these people, when you're talking about Saki and Pep and many others, the emotional drain on them is something that 99% of people cannot comprehend or understand. They can recognize it, but they can't really understand it on a physical nature. I've been in situations like that, to my little modest nothing level, when I've been in coaching, and to deal with it, because this was my town, this was my little town, Fort Lauderdale, and that was my team over there. And it would crush me sometimes. It would. Some people can deal with it. Some people wear it pressure like a Cartier necklace.
John Madden is another example, right? Right. John Madden left the game because he felt the pressure. But how does a guy like, I mean, that's why to me, there's no greater manager than Sir Alex Ferguson. Right. He ate this pressure. It's like for lunch and dinner. He's like, heck with it.
Dealing with that and recognizing it from people on the outside that give the likes of Ferguson and Pep and Ancelotti and Saki all the credit, and Mourinho, all these credits is deserved, of course, but there's another big dimension that is missing that we aren't really privileged to take into and to weigh the how much it affects them, that heavy, that hard-working intensity that never leaves you day in, day out. But as long as the players are getting the message, that's what, in my eyes, and I think in these coaches, then they can deal with the pressure. It's when they stop hearing it. It's like what Danny Alves, the wonderful Alves quote was, if Pep Guardiola told me to jump off Camp Nou's top level, I'd think, well, there must be something good down there. To buy into a player like that, to buy into a coach like that, I think, Neil, that helps them ease off of that pressure when that success is there, but it never ever stops eating you away, Charlie.
Yeah, but Ray, that is so well said, and this is I'm fascinated by this sort of line that Neil and you have brought us down here, and it's, you said something that was really important. You said every player bought into it. And I think there's also a distinction that every player could execute on it perfectly. And what happens when you bring in players that can't execute, that can't follow the lead? Ibrahimovic is a great example for an individual. I have a question for both you guys. I think that Messi was the perfect point in his career where he was trying to become the greatest player in the world, that he bought into it. I'm not sure that, a guy of his stature today, or even a couple of years ago, a guy of Cristiano Ronaldo's stature would buy into that as much. And I just think that he had the perfect team because they were all at the right age and right moment in their careers.
And he brought them through, Charlie.
They bought in.
He brought them through because they were in the second team and he was coaching the second team and he brought them up. Xavi and Iniesta and Messi. Busquets later
was the big one,
and so they were his kids. When he went to Bayern Munich, it was completely different. I mean, he had a year out in the States. Did you meet him when he was in the States that year?
I did. I spent time with him. I take that back.
His sabbatical was in New York.
I was supposed to. I tell you two stories. I was with Sir Alex Ferguson, and he said, "Charlie, I have to go. I'm having dinner with Pep Guardiola." And he said to me, "I would bring you," but he said he wanted to talk about something personal, and they were talking about his career at Manchester United. And I was like, "Of course not." You know what I mean? I'm not going to intrude if it's that type of dinner. The second thing, he had met with Uli Hoeneß that afternoon, earlier in the afternoon. This was during that same time period where, talk about my brush with greatness, where I was having dinner with Sir Alex Ferguson at Cipriani at Midtown, and Uli Hoeneß is there. And I'm like, what the hell is Uli Hoeneß doing here? And then it hit me. So, when everyone said, "Oh my God, he's going to Bayern Munich," what a freaking surprise!
And what a decision!
I was like, "Wow, that's how he made his decision that week." He met with Sir Alex Ferguson and Uli Hoeneß within a 2-day period.
Because everybody thought he was going to go to Man United,
right?
No, it was going to be Chelsea because Roman Abramovich was meeting him, met him. Actually, Charlie,
it's the money, you morons.
Yeah, he met him. Quote Giorgio Canaglia. Met him. When Chelsea were playing in Seattle I don't remember, it must have been 2012, I think, in Seattle, and he met Pep in New York and took him for dinner, And Chelsea would have paid him more, let's face it, than any other club. And he decided against that and went to Bayern Munich the following year. Now, Rocky, when he went to Bayern, they just won the treble. So they were on a high as compared to Barcelona when he took them over. And he couldn't win the Champions League with them. And they were defending the Champions League in the first year, of course. But again, it was winning by a mile. In that first season, they won the Bundesliga by 19 points from Borussia Dortmund, and they won the league earlier than any of the top 5 leagues in Europe had ever been won. They won it at, I think, the beginning of April, and they beat the league runners-up Borussia Dortmund in the cup final as well. But they got trounced by Real Madrid in the semi-final of the Champions League. The following season, they won the Bundesliga by 10 points.
Real Madrid 7-0. Over 2 legs.
Yeah, 5, I think it was.
Okay,
John.
well.
5, yeah.
It was
they lost 4-0 at home. The following season, his second season and his third, they won the Bundesliga by 10 points. But each season, they lost the semi-final of the Champions League to Barcelona and then to Atletico Madrid. Now, the Atletico Madrid one was interesting because it was a close game. And this is where I just wonder, Rocky, close games. His teams win by a distance. They don't often win by a small margin.
Right. I don't know exactly what your point is, because that's football, Neil, isn't it? I mean, not to just give you an offhanded response.
No, but I think it's a fair point, Rocky. You know,
right.
I mean, you know,
they play his way.
All clubs. Go on.
They play his way. They play this unbelievably expansive, passing, unified game. But if it's not working, they often then struggle to win by a small
Who did they lose to when they were Man City? They lost. Was it Monaco? Or who was it?
Monaco in the Champions League. They won 5-3 at home and lost 3-1 away.
I'll give you an example of where I'm not arguing against your point. All I'm doing is saying that happens with every coach. I think all the great coaches might have that sort of result at times in different seasons, perhaps with different clubs. But I'll give you an example of where it didn't turn out. And it was against your own Chelsea. It was against a tremendous Chelsea team that really could have, should have, would have won the game until Iniesta hit that goal. And what
I was at that game too, fellas.
2009 Champions League semi-final.
What that game did for Barcelona fans was, because they would always be in this team, like you're saying, winning it with style and winning it with alacrity and expansive impression and winning even. You know, I'd say that Real Madrid game, teams give them a lot of seasons where they were chasing them down. But that game in particular for me stands out. And I'll tell you why. Because Barcelona had always been the team that would get found out by those dogged teams, by those teams that would get you, and if it was an even game, it would go their way. By whatever fates that convene in the heavens, whatever. I always felt as about they're going to get you. They're going to get you. There was this awful knot in you that they're going to get you. And when it went the other way, almost against the odds, on that night, it lifted a huge weight, I think, of the club that they can say, you say we can do it that way. We can do it that way as well.
But Rocky, that game was marred by horrible refereeing. Horrible refereeing. And it was, I was at that game, and there could have been, I mean, without
that's my point.
Shout, there were 3 penalty shots. One, PK actually handed the ball like this. He's standing there, hits his hand, and he stops.
Right.
Everyone stopped except the referee.
To be fair, though, when the referee ran away, Michael Ballack chased him and couldn't catch him up, and I think that was probably why Barcelona won.
But that's my point. And that was the game where it should have went. This is what I started out by saying. On that
get the
night,
breaks.
it could have, should have, would have. But it turned. It turned
Yep.
for whatever inclinations that were out there in a game of football. Bad refereeing, bad breaks, bad situations. On that night, in the name of Guardiola, they found something within themselves to take it away, and you two are absolutely right. You're arguing against it, and I can understand that part, but it was something that just transformed the way that these players, their fans in particular, look towards Guardiola, that they can do it that way as well.
What did you think of it?
Hang on, Neil. I think that's a brilliant point. And I think the same thing happened to Spain in 2008 when they finally beat Italy in the Euros, and they won it on penalty kicks. A game that this wasn't the invincible Spanish team yet, right? This was a game where they would have in most years would have lost, right? Against Italy in those days, not today where Spain's the dominant team. In those days, Italy was the dominant team, and they were missing Pirlo and Gattuso for the game due to suspensions, and they eked it out for a penalty kick win, right? But that changed Spain forever. That changed Spain forever. In 2008, they went on to win the Euros. They went on to win the World Cup. They went on to win the Euros again. But you're absolutely right, Rocky. It can be either a funny game. I mean, your point is amazing, because it could be a funny game that you get the breaks or whatever happens, but that changes your fortune forever, really.
But given the power that Bayern Munich is, and let's remember, in 2011 and 2012, Borussia Dortmund won the Bundesliga. So Munich had won the treble in 2013, but they'd only won the league that 1 year, and that's what Pep took over. He won the league each year. He won 2 cups, DFB Pokals, in the 3 years, but he never got beyond the semi-final of the Champions League. Was his time at Bayern Munich, in your eyes, a success?
Asking me, Neil?
Yeah, he's putting you on the hot seat. I think you're always right, Ray.
I think his time at Bayern Munich was a success.
Yeah, I think it was, but it just left a feeling of, I thought he'd win the Champions League.
No, I think the legacy of him will always be protected. But, you know, his team at Bayern Munich was beloved, and the fans absolutely. And that criteria that was set against them, I think, demeans him. In the same way as the World Cup, that people use that towards
Messi.
Lionel Messi, and for me, it's not just ridiculous; it's an absolute disgrace when you weigh all of the accomplishments of winning at the club level in modern day football as opposed to World Cup football. But that's an argument for a different day and a different story. We're talking about Pep now, and Pep's situation at this Bayern Munich side, Charlie, as close as he came, I don't think he'll have any sort of effect on him. And I think people look for any sort of slur that he's always had the big money, he's always had the big players, he's always had the people to save him. But for me, it's ridiculous. You could say, Cruyff, as you said before, and Saki, they both stopped coaching before the decade was out. They couldn't take it. This guy's still going on. He will win the Champions League with another club. He may do it this
year
with Manchester City.
Sure.
But that team, I back them every year. Bayern Munich, because they're going to win with this guy.
Well, he didn't take a break from Munich.
I wanted to talk. I just wanted to talk to you two guys about managers that came in specifically to stop Pep Guardiola. And that to me is a fascinating thing because, let's be honest, Jose Mourinho came in to stop Pep Guardiola when they saw what he did with that Inter Milan team, as you said, Ray, that the volcano erupting, causing Barcelona to take a bus and all this stuff. And they got all the little breaks. Inter won that leg, beat, as Marco Materazzi said, the best team ever in his mind. But they got the breaks. They won. They went on to win the treble. He went to Real Madrid because he beat Barcelona, not because he won the Champions League. Because if he had won the Champions League and never faced Barcelona along the way, I don't think they would have made him the manager of Real Madrid.
Fantastic. Well, let me ask you this, though, and on that same theme, because if it had been Mourinho was well in the line to take over that Barcelona team.
Sure.
Would we be still talking about the man and the team that, for me, spoiled football for the rest of my life?
No, we wouldn't be talking about it like that. But you know what we may be talking about? A guy that won the Champions League 3 years in a row.
Maybe
because
different.
that guy, with that talent on that team, Pep got perfection out of it, as you said.
Yep.
But Jose, and certainly in those days, was a winner, and he figured out ways to win. And whether it was pretty or not, that team might have even won. Odd to say, but they may have won the same amount of trophies with Jose. The difference is you wouldn't give a damn, right? You'd be like, I don't like the way they play.
Hey, Charlie, just Neil as well. Remember those 18 days that there was like 4 games played, 4 Clásicos when against Mourinho and Guardiola. What dream days they were. Just on a footballing level, Neil, it was amazing. And the response that Pep gave, he got a standing ovation after he came into the locker room. Never happened before from his team. But he had been at that press conference after, and he says, we'll see who wins it in the end. And he said something in Portuguese, puto amo. That's what he was. I can't translate that, but that's what he was firing at the Portuguese man, and says, "Then we'll see." And it was a sight of venom that the players had never heard on a public level. But when he came back into that locker room, that's where he got it again from that night when Iniesta ignited something in the team that went on and were the most beautiful, dominating team in footballing history.
And I got let's bring final story for you, Neil. In that goal, when Iniesta scored that goal, okay, and he took his jersey off, ran behind the goal to the fans, and it normally should have been
a booking,
and he would have missed the final.
Yeah,
he did not get the booking.
That's right.
So even little breaks, Ray, you bring up something that's an incredible, a little silly little thing like that.
But he was a shocking referee.
Yeah, but a little silly thing like that, and you say, now, Sir Alex said at the moment, because they were taking on Manchester United, he said, no, you want to play their best, and this kid's the best. So, we want that, right? Any manager is going to say that. But probably they may not have won in Rome 2-0 without Iniesta on that team. So, these are little breaks that you got to understand. Ray said it perfectly. It doesn't matter how you get the break. Could be just dumb luck, but it could be, whatever. But you get that break and it changes history.
Let's bring it up to the modern day. He moved from Munich after 3 years to Manchester City. Without a break this time. And in his first season at Manchester City, it was his first time of not winning a trophy in a season. And during that, he inherited a team that was getting old and really wasn't functioning on the greatest level. And at the end of that season, they went out and they spent £135 million on fullbacks, outside backs, and completely transformed the team. But during that first season, when they weren't winning, he became very unpopular in England with his post-match interviews, where he was tense, snappy, rude, patronising, and patronising, really, and to the questions. And for me, Rocky, I didn't think he was any of those things. Oh. I thought he was tense, struggling, vulnerable. He it was all getting on top of it. And then they went out and got the right players. Now, I went to a game in which I really studied Manchester City, basically because it wasn't against Chelsea and I wasn't watching my team. It was against Fulham. And their movement was something I've never seen on a football pitch before. Because I think at Barcelona, he was intent on that huge pitch on making sure that the two wide players up front stayed wide. Whether it was Pedro on one side and Henry on the other, or Sanchez on one side and Villa on the other, whatever, they stayed wide. But now at Manchester City, it was anybody, but they had to be wide. So you started off with, say, Mahrez one side and Sterling the other. But they could come in field and the fullbacks could go wide, Walker or Mendy, or one of the two central midfielders, De Bruyne or David Silva, could go wide, and then the fullbacks would come in to midfield and take their place. It was the most total football I've ever seen, but there was always someone wide, and they were making the pitch as big as possible.
Perfectly framed, Neil, and in summing that up, that little soliloquy that you painted so nicely and accurately, the ethic behind it all is the team. Mm-hmm. And that's the brilliance of what Guardiola does. He did it with every club he's been in. The additions change in the time that he spends, but it's not because he had Messi. It's not because he had Arjen Robben. It's not that he's got De Bruyne. It's not that. It's what he brings and falls into his team, and his tactical brilliance is nothing if he can't get the players everywhere to buy into it and take in and to produce it into an unstoppable force.
And what I think he does, Rocky, what I think he does, which is different from other managers, there's been a trend in the last few years, and I blame Charlie Stillitano completely for this trend, because it's been led by the likes of Antonio Conte, the Italian managers. They tell you what to do. If you're in a position, you do A, B, or C. If you're here, you do A, B, or C. If you're here, this player will be at A, that player will be at B, and that player will be at C. And if they're not, they'll be off the pitch. And right. I don't think Pep coaches like that. I think Pep coaches in a way that says, if you keep the pitch wide, if you keep everybody close to the ball, but there's always somebody on the other side of the pitch, and if you have to move the ball over there, you move it, and you get over there as quickly as possible. But beyond that, I think he's always trying to give the player on the ball as many options as possible. Not A, B, or C, but A to Z.
Can I jump in here like this? Can I jump in for a second? Because, we've been, Rocky, you've been absolutely brilliant, but I want to defend him for a second here. Every manager I've talked to, every executive I've talked to that I respect, guys like Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, guys like Capello, guys like Sir Alex Ferguson, they all use the word genius for this guy. And even managers that have their battles with him, Jose Mourinho as an example, respect the guy. I think that he is able to make players better. Yeah. He also has this wonderful thing about him that I think that is the game. Manfred Schellscheid, a wonderful coach here in the New Jersey area, sort of a local hero, always says, let the game teach the player. And that was like a wonderful thing to me. I think Pep educates them. And I've said this before, much like law school teaches you how to think like a lawyer, Pep teaches you how to play like a player. He convinces educates you that you need to do these things on your own. What separates greatness? Anybody could read statutes, right? You know what I mean? But it's that clever mind that says, I know how I'm going to apply this statute. And this is what Pep Guardiola does. He gives these guys the tools to make decisions in the games. And when he has guys that are best players in the game, he has perfection for 90 minutes. Right. When he doesn't have every great player, He has perfection, and we've seen it with Man City for 20, 30 minutes here and there, 50 minutes here. They break down. Every once in a while, they have a perfect game, 90 minutes. But even no matter how you break it down, he educates these guys how to perform in the game. That's why I think he's one of the greatest of all time.
When it gets tight, Tottenham in the Champions League, then it's not so easy. He is, to put it in track and field terms, he is someone who leads from the front.
He's a great leader, Neil, and that confidence from him spills into his teams. It's been rewarded with success, and that dedication that he's got to his craft, despite everything. He deals with them as not as even as footballers. He said it himself. He's dealing with people. He translates that. He understands the professional aspects of it, but as the great player he was, the metronome that he was, the identity that he brought through Barcelona. And I've got to give a big shout out to Tito Villanova, rest in peace, because on his first steps into the cauldron of world coaching, it was Tito that was right alongside him. And I would always interrupt Phil when he was talking about some flipping statistics and say, look at this, look at this. And Tito would be like that little whisper in his ear with a calmness and a serenity that Guardiola would take it in his eyes, those beautiful big eyes surveying but he would take it all in again on that human level. This was his childhood friend, of course, so they knew each other intrinsically. But I just wanted to say that all of his assistant coaches bring something, but nobody did it the way Tito Villanova did.